His spiritual and life journey took him from Louisiana to Canada, back to Louisiana, back to Canada. Brian Comeaux, a gifted singer and musician, was involved with the iconic group, the Imperials, one of the big names in gospel music. He was pastoring for many years, was actually enjoying life. Things were going real well. But 5 years ago was involved in a serious car accident that nearly left him paralyzed. Brian, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Hey, thank you so much.
Now, before we talk about that event 5 years ago, tell me about your spiritual background. How did you come to know Jesus?
Very religious background when we were young. You know, you go to church on Sundays once a month, periodically. Coming to Christ, fast forward, you know, where I was lost, no answers to life, following the crowd of everyone else. Sister was invited to a small little church in the sticks in Youngsville, Louisiana. Preacher was preaching and felt like he was, you know, speaking straight to me. And he said, there's only one way, this, you know, and you can't work your way to heaven, but you have to accept Christ. It's the only way. Our whole family at the end of that revival accepted Christ, and that began the journey later in high school years, most probably junior, senior year.
So you were a young man at the time?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you had heard the gospel message, and I know there's people watching say, yeah, well, I go to church, I do the right things.
Right.
How do you make that transition?
Well, I wanted more, though. I didn't want just the law that I'm going to church or I'm doing the right things, but am I obeying Him? You know, am I listening to God? Am I spending time with Him in my devotions, in which I had none at all at that point? But it was a desire. The one who created me, I wanted to get to know. And in that little revival services, that's where I think my heart that started to pull. I need to know this Christ, not just know of Him, because a lot of people know of Him. I didn't want to be in that group. I wanted to really know who God was and, you know, does He have a plan for my life?
Yeah, and a part of that plan, I guess, for you, because there's that passion there, you wanted to use your gift in music.
Sure.
And you got involved with the Imperials, and I think one of those groups that really changed gospel music.
Oh, it's amazing. The Imperials came along when Southern Gospel was the biggest and went more contemporary. It was a little controversial at first for them, but they really, they shed the light for a lot of groups, contemporary Christian music to come on. Imperials were a group, when I was just accepted Christ, you emulate, you know, you want, Russ Taff had that cry to his voice, man, when he would preach, because it was different. It wasn't just entertaining or singing. He really was, you know, preaching from his heart. So traveling, doing stuff, and then finally met at a church, and they come and do a concert, and they hear me lead praise and worship, and then the invitation was given.
And how did you feel about being involved with this, again, iconic group?
It was amazing. It's an honor, but at the end of the day, it's like service. It is a privilege to be on whether you park cars or greet people in the front of the building. The Imperials it was a great avenue, a great opportunity, because you could sing before, you know, thousands of people. But you remember, we were in that transition part where it wasn't the stadiums anymore. We went back to the church, a local church, on Love Art from basis, because you got to build back, you know, what was our calling? Is it just to do the bigger concerts, or is it to reach people in the local church?
So eventually you go back into pastoring, you come up to Canada,
right.
A music pastor.
Right.
And then you head back to the U.S., you start a church with your wife, Kim.
Right.
Things are going good. What happened though? You're involved in a serious car accident and it nearly left you paralyzed.
Yeah, we came back from a vacation, and I remember the day like it was yesterday. It's coming back on a Saturday night, rehearsing with the band. On our way back home, my son and I, driving on the road, and a girl hits us going 55 miles an hour, and she's on drugs, and she's, you know, not in her right mind. But we were dead stop, and that hit spun us around. My first thought was, it's almost like a movie. You know, you're twisting and turning, the car's spinning, and when it comes to a stop, you can't feel anything. You can't move anything. And so everything goes through your mind. I just kept smiling, and my son kept saying, "Dad, are you okay? You okay?" And I kept thinking, okay, God, what's the next step? You know, I got church tomorrow.
Really?
You know, well, I'm thinking, you know, put me in a wheelchair, bring me on the platform. I've got the sermon. You know, nothing should stop. And I just couldn't move anything. And it took me about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes before I started feeling anything.
So you're actually thinking about preaching?
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean,
were you in shock or?
No, I'm just thinking church, and I think in people, I think souls, I think, you know, at this point, you always think for the weekend. You always think, you know, who else will be saved?
Really?
Who else is going to come to Christ? What else is going to happen? So when you're sitting in that car, you have a lot to think about when you can't move anything.
And then you were told that you may be paralyzed.
Well, when we were driven up to the hospital, they first brought us to our local hospital. They weren't specialists in nerves, so they drove us up to New Orleans main hospital, Ochsner's, and the doctor says, you know, there could be a possibility. I mean, the good thing is those nerves, the vertebrae that were broken there, it's not going to paralyze you. We can fix this.
Okay.
And so they had surgery.
What were your thoughts at that point, though? I mean, you're injured. If you are paralyzed, or what if God doesn't heal me?
You know, I think the thought always is, God, you can always use. You used Joni whenever she was paralyzed. You used other people. This shouldn't stop ministry. I mean, like me helping, not just quote ministry, but me assisting or caring for or sharing the gospel message. So the scary part is, you know, what am I going to do? But you're always thinking, God always makes a way. He always opens up a door. You know, Sunday we preach about Leah's life and how she wanted to be loved by one man, but God, in her disappointment, still found a way to bless her life. And I know that God does it for all of us. Paralyzed or not, life still goes on.
And you were determined to preach that Sunday.
Oh.
I'd imagine you didn't.
No, I didn't. No, I was in a high.
I was just saying, or did you get hooked up by Skype or something and preach anyway?
No. I asked my associate pastor, and he preached that Sunday.
Okay, when we come back, Brian, because like a lot of people, go into ministry, they have a lot of zeal.
Right.
They want to do something for God,
Right.
and sometimes we maybe don't pray enough about things. So we'll talk more about that when we come back with Brian Comeaux on 100 Huntley Street.